It's time for Go Veggie with Kay. Vegetarian cooking for your good health. Now, here's Kay Stepkin.
Hello, and welcome to Go Veggie with Kay. I'm Kay Stepkin. I'm the president of Go Veggie. We are a nonprofit educational organization. We're here today in this beautiful Whole Foods market in Chicago. And in this space, I'm going to show you how to make Louisiana red beans and rice with cornbread and a simple fruit salad. Now, nothing says New Orleans more than Louisiana red beans and rice. And what better dish to go with it than a cornbread? And so, this is our ode to New Orleans. If you want to stay healthy, the way to go is vegetarian. But good health is about more than just eliminating meat from your diet. It's also about eating the foods that nature has created for us exactly the way that she's created them, with all the vitamins and the nutrients intact, without stripping them out and without adding any toxic chemicals. But we'll have more dialogue about that when we start doing the recipes. We're also going to share a few wonderful minutes with George Eisman. George is a registered dietitian and he's an author, and he's going to be talking to us about the value of vegetable protein as opposed to meat protein. First, we're going to cook the beans. I soaked these beans overnight, but by soaking them, they're going to cook in the same exact amount of time as the brown rice. Before I soaked them, I spread them out on a cookie sheet, slightly angled it, and pushed the beans down the sheet all the time looking for debris, for any stones. I did find a little stone in the bean. Soaked it overnight, and now we're just going to cook it in water to cover the beans. I didn't exactly measure the water. There's also one whole garlic clove in here, and it'll help to flavor the beans. I'm going to wash this brown rice the way I wash most whole grains. Cover it with water. Mix it around with my hands. And you have to give it 2 or 3 rinsings until the water turns clear. Now, if I were just to put this rice in the strainer and pour water over it, whatever dust or dirt is in here would stay right in the rice. So I rinse it a few times, then pour it in the strainer. And there you go. I'm going to brush a little bit of oil in the pan in order to saute the rice. It makes it so that it's not gummy and it doesn't stick together. It gives the rice a very nice texture. And notice I'm just using a brush, so I use a minimal amount of oil. I'm going to saute this rice just for a few minutes until it gets a nutty smell to it. Seitan is one of the most ingenious of foods. Another name for this is wheat gluten. This is the protein part of the wheat. It has the characteristic that when it's kneaded, which it was kneaded before it got in these chunks, when it's kneaded, the protein develops, it sticks together, it forms long and firm strands, and this gives it a very meat-like texture. Years ago we used to make the seitan from scratch, but now you can buy it ready-made and it is delicious. For 25 years I operated a vegetarian and a whole grain restaurant, bakery, and bulk food store. In the first few years we had to make seitan entirely by hand. 3 tablespoons of olive oil, a little bit of liquid smoke, and the seitan. The reason I use smoke in this dish is that in Louisiana, red beans and rice is often made on Mondays using the ham bone left over from Sunday's dinner. And so this will give it a very authentic flavor. I'd like to show you how to chop an onion, just to be safe. 1/2 of the onion has little hairs on it where it attached to the plant. You want to cut off the end of the other side. That gives you a nice stable onion to work with, so you're going to be a lot less likely to cut yourself. Peel it. We suggest cutting the onion into quarters. So there's a quarter. And 2/4 can stay together, and then it can be sliced. 2 green peppers. Green pepper, you can cut it in quarters when they're this big. Take out all the seeds and the fibrous part inside. And then we will slice this into strips. I'm going to saute the seitan. After the seitan is sauteed, I'm going to add the vegetables, and then we'll add some flavorings, which is molasses. Molasses is the liquid that's left over after white sugar is extracted from the sugar cane. Most of the minerals, the nutrients, stay behind with the molasses. I'm going to put a little soy sauce in. Balsamic vinegar. Balsamic just means thick and aromatic. And there's so many different kinds of balsamic vinegar depending on what kind of tubs they're aged in, how long they're aged. I'm going to add some tomato paste. This is going to be one of the few items that I have taken out of a can. A little bit of black pepper. And a little bit of vegetable broth. This is a wonderful just a wonderful thing to be able to buy instead of making vegetable broth. Okay, the seitan is starting to brown. I'm going to add the peppers, the onions. We'll let that cook until the onions are about half done. Should just take a few minutes. And the rice could saute for another minute. I'm going to put this up a little bit higher and then add the water to it. The oil that I use to saute the rice is olive oil. And no matter what oil you use, you really don't need to know the details about how oil is extracted from the seed or what kind of solvents they put in it. If you just use your instincts, that could guide you toward using a healthy oil. The oil should smell like the seed it comes from, and it should never be like a very clear light color. Olive oil is sort of green. Peanut oil should smell like peanuts. Corn oil should smell like corn. I have 1 cup of rice. I'm going to add exactly 2 cups of water. As soon as this comes to a boil, I'm going to turn the heat down so low that if it were any lower, it would go out, but we'll let it boil first. Well, the onion is partially cooked here. So now I'm going to add the flavorings that we just mixed up. Get them all out of the bowl. Oh, this is smelling good. I'm going to add 2 cups of the stock, put a lid on it, and let this cook. Just turn that down. We're also going to add chopped garlic, a bay leaf, and then 2 serrano peppers. I took the seeds out of the peppers, as with the seeds it's a little hot for me. At the very end, after we add the brown rice and the beans, I'll put in some salt. This is sea salt. But there's really not that much difference between sea salt and land salt, as land salt is really just dried up beds of sea or ocean water. The important thing is that this salt is a little bit gray. That's an indicator that there's a lot of minerals still in the salt. They have not all been processed out. I'm going to drain the beans and add them to our dish. But I'll save the cooking water because every time you reheat this dish, you want to add a little water or stock. And this would be tastier than just plain water. I'm going to add all the rice. When I'm done stirring, I will put in the salt. Adding that sea salt. This smells very good. There's our rice and beans.
Cornbread is up next on Go Veggie. Once again, Kay Stepkin.
We're going to start with whole wheat pastry flour. There's two kinds of whole wheat flour, and pastry flour is very low in gluten. Whole wheat bread flour is high in gluten. Often when people think they don't like whole wheat flour, it's because they've used the wrong kind. We don't want this to be like seitan and get very tough and meat-like and chewy. We want it to be low in gluten, light, delicate, even sort of fall apart. Cornmeal, this is also a whole grain cornmeal. Even with cornmeal, the bran is ordinarily removed, the germ is removed, whole grain. Baking powder. This is a baking powder that does not have alum in it. Most baking powder has alum, another word for aluminum, which has been implicated in Alzheimer's disease. Let me get it all out here. Baking soda. And sea salt, again, which is gray, which is an indicator of the minerals. I'm deliberately putting all the dry ingredients in one bowl and the wet in another. I'm going to blend the tofu with a little bit of the soy milk till it's really smooth and creamy. Imagine that you can go into several storefronts right here in Chicago and actually see tofu being made. We have tofu factories in Chicago, right in the neighborhoods. That's how fresh I like to get my tofu. Just going to blend this till it's smooth and creamy. A little more soy milk. So much of soybeans, as well as cornmeal, are genetically engineered that it's really good to get it organic. Great. And here we have our wet bowl. I'll explain in a minute why I am doing this. I'm using the tofu as a replacement for eggs. Where a cornbread this size could normally have 4 eggs. So I'm using 4 ounces of tofu. And I'll just get it right off of the lid here also. Going to mix in some non-hydrogenated margarine. You don't want that, when they hydrogenate margarine, put in hydrogen molecules, it really clogs our veins, our arteries. Just going to whip this up. And then the sweetener that I'm going to add is maple syrup, and of course it's just pure maple syrup. There is no sugar added to it. I'm going to add the 2 cups of soy milk. Now, the reason I kept the dry ingredients separate is I am going to just pour them all in at once. If I were to pour it in a little at a time, I would be developing the gluten too much. I would just pour all the dry ingredients in and then stir it as little as possible until you can't see the flour separate anymore. This is a dish, cornbread. It can be eaten as a dessert. It can be eaten as a quick bread instead of a yeasted bread. It's really versatile, and it goes great with beans. Instead of a treated pan, I really do not trust those treated pans where the cake will just come right out. I am using a parchment paper so that the cornbread doesn't stick, and I'm going to spray it with a little canola spray oil. They have olive oil. They have different kinds of oils in a spray bottle, but you use a lot less oil that way. I'm going to spray the sides, the parchments on the bottom. Just pour it in. You will love this cornbread. Let me just get it all out here. A quick bread like this, you can use it in so many ways. A quick bread, you can make this into cupcakes. It can be made into a cake. Or it can be made into a cornbread like we're doing. Those are really interchangeable type recipes. Just going to tap it down a little bit. We're going to bake the cornbread for 40 minutes. We're going to have a chance to meet George Eisman, registered dietitian and an author. I met up with George at Vegetarian Summerfest, which is a great vegetarian conference that I try to get to every year. We vegetarians are not only organized locally, we're organized nationally and even internationally.
Our guest today has a postgraduate degree in nutrition and is a registered dietitian. He has created a unique home study course on vegetarianism and is the author of The Most Noble Diet. I am so pleased to introduce to you George Eisman. Many people believe that meat is the only place to get protein or to get the best protein. Is this true?
Absolutely not, Kay. There's lots of other sources of protein from the plant kingdom as well as those from the animal kingdom. I myself haven't eaten meat in 35 years, and I'd be suffering a pretty bad protein deficiency if that were the case. One of the best sources of protein in the plant kingdom comes from what we call legumes or beans, things like black beans, pinto beans, black-eyed peas. These are wonderful sources of protein, and every bit as good quality as you would find in any meat. Most people have the mistaken idea that plant proteins are somehow incomplete, and that's not true. There was a book that came out about 30 years ago that pushed that idea, and they've since apologized for making it sound like there was something wrong with plant protein. So beans and whole grains, vegetables, and even fruits have protein. Protein deficiency is a very, very rare thing to come across, and it's not something that vegetarians and people that eat a plant-based diet really have to worry about.
So you don't think it matters if a person gets his protein from beans, grains, or from meat, eggs?
No, if you get your protein from beans and grains, you're going to get as good a quality of protein as you're going to get from meat and eggs. As a matter of fact, it is a problem for a lot of people who get too much protein. When you get too much protein, you have problems. You can start kidney disease. You can have problems losing calcium from your bones, and osteoporosis is related to eating a diet too rich in protein. It really isn't optimal to get too much protein, so we don't need to think in terms of where we get our protein. We need more to think in terms of getting the right amount of protein and not too much.
So do you think that a lot of Americans get too much protein?
A lot of Americans probably do. I mean, kidney failure is the 7th leading cause of death in this country, and it's the leading cause of death among certain people like bodybuilders who take lots of protein powders. They're really overdoing the protein, and their kidneys tend to suffer from it.
What should a vegetarian be eating to get a balanced diet?
To get a balanced diet, eat things like grains, things like wheat and rice and oats and barley. Those are the grains that sustain civilizations for centuries. The beans that I mentioned, and then vegetables are very important, especially green vegetables, green leafy vegetables, things like kale and collard greens and broccoli and green lettuce and things like that are very good sources of vitamins and minerals. And then, of course, fruits. Things like berries, strawberries, and peaches and plums and things like that. Those are powerhouses of vitamins and minerals. And those are really the four food groups for a plant-based diet are fruits, vegetables, grains, and beans. And they provide all the nutrients that most people need.
I understand that the people we call the Eskimos eat a lot more meat protein than other Americans, and yet I've never heard that they suffer from this or that it's harmful to them.
Well, they actually do. The peoples of the North, native peoples of the North that eat a lot of fish and a lot of other animal protein, they suffer a lot. Their leading cause of death is kidney failure also, and they also suffer a very high rate of osteoporosis. Their bones get thin from all that excess protein that they eat. Even though they do eat a lot of calcium in the form of fish bones, it doesn't protect their bones from that loss of calcium that comes from eating too much protein. And the lifespan of those people is only into their 50s. They're not a long-lived people. What we hear about is that they don't get heart attacks and strokes as much as we do because not eating such a high-fat diet. But high fat causes those diseases, whereas high protein just causes other diseases. What we really need to be eating is a high carbohydrate diet, a complex, unrefined carbohydrate diet, and then we avoid those diseases related to malnutrition.
Well, that's very interesting. Thank you so much, George.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, Kay.
It was wonderful talking to George Eisman and having him here with us on Go Veggie with Kay. Now we're going to make a very simple fruit dessert. It's so simple and really so tasty that your children will love making this with you. We're going to start with some lime juice. This is a great little tool for getting the juice out of the lime. About a tablespoon of lime juice, a teaspoon of date sugar. Date sugar is toasted or dehydrated ground up dates. That is all. Pinch of salt. A 1/16 of a teaspoon of spearmint extract. And this part your kids will really love. Ginger ale. A tablespoon of ginger ale. I love a fruit salad that's moist. It makes it so much tastier and more fun to eat. This could actually be a salad if you put some lettuce leaves under it. It could be a dessert. You could put a little dollop of non-dairy yogurt on top of it. You could eat it as a snack. I use several colors of apples just because it looks so pretty. This is a Fuji apple. I just cut it in quarters. Use a little paring knife to take out the seeds. And then slice it. So this is the red. I don't know if I whisked this or not, so I'm just going to whisk it again. Some red apples, green apples, grapes. You could use red or green. Going to mix this all together. It's really almost that simple. I'm going to cut a little fresh spearmint into it, which gives it a wonderful, refreshing flavor. And sometimes it's easier for me to use the scissors, actually, than to use the knife, especially when chopping fresh herbs. This gives it a great flavor. I'm going to top it off with some toasted sliced almonds. If you can buy them toasted, that's great. If you can't, you could put them on a cookie sheet in your oven for 5 minutes or put them on a dry pan on top of the stove for 5 minutes. Toasted almonds. A little garnish. And there is our fruit dessert. What a simple and yet delicious dessert. Here are the 3 recipes: Louisiana red beans and rice, cornbread, and a wonderful fruit salad. This is a great combination for your vegetarian dining pleasure and a wonderful way to enjoy your increased energy as you go Veggie. Until next time, I'm Kay Stepkin. Now I've got to try this cornbread. Mmm.